So basically, first of all, thank you all for coming. And Susan Schreiber asked me to give this in her mother's memory. It's her yahrzeit, Malka Bat Dani. So in her zchut, we were giving this shir. And I actually was preparing something else, but then in light of, unfortunately, all the events that have been occurring, whoever's been watching the news, you cannot escape that on a daily basis. We're bombarded with these horrific anti-Semitic attacks on our people. And it's very upsetting when, there are a lot of people who have a hard time, who couldn't or wouldn't want to imagine that in these Western democratic societies that have until now been progressing when it comes to racism in terms of equality and tolerance and all these things, that they're subject, and that it's actually getting worse, that we're experiencing so much hate crimes and scary things in our times. And I think some people are just shocked because they thought, with their democratic ethos, that this is like an impossibility, but it's not. And we see things all over. Everybody's got, this is the problem. We have to have guns, or we have to move to Israel. There's like a whole host of, everybody's got their thing. And I really do kind of, even though people knock all these things, I believe in a little bit of everything. But I think that in order to really combat such issues, it comes from core problems, and you can't really use band-aid solutions. We have to really deal with becoming better people, and that's why I'm always so in love with the Torah. As we know, the Torah was given to us as a guide in terms of perfecting the self, and it helps us to learn how to cultivate healthy relationships and how to interact with people. And there's no better place to look than in the Torah in terms of understanding how to live a better life, and especially when we're trying to hopefully get to this utopian kind of place where we want to be. And I always speak of redemption, and my family makes fun of me because it's such a missionary type word, but when I say it, redemption, I really just mean in a place that we all want to live and feel safe and at peace, and everybody wants that. So anyways, the Baal Shem Tov says that in order to have national redemption, we cannot have that unless first we work on having a personal redemption. So I'm going to start with that, because in this parsha, and this parsha is really so intricately connected to the parshas that came before and the one that comes after, and so we're going to be looking not just in Vayigash, but in the surrounding parshiot to help us with these issues, and hopefully be able to take some things with us in order to make a brighter future. So I think what I decided to start with was Yaakov, because I think he's the best person that we're given in the narrative his personal journey of this internal battle of self, with the duality that is Yaakov, with his Yaakov and his Yisrael, and his lower self and his higher self, and the issues that he had to face, and how he had to get what he was supposed to do, and how he was supposed to get through it, and how we're supposed to be Bnei Yisrael, and we're supposed to be the higher version of Yaakov in order to have that society that goes well, and healthy self, and a healthy world around us. So when we look at Yaakov, it's very important in our belief system is that our name represents, of course, the essence of who we are. And so when Yaakov comes into the world, we know he's called Yaakov because he was holding on to the heel of Esav. But this is not just something that represents the physical act of what happened when he came into this world, but this represents also everything Yaakov everything, the way he progressed and the way he lived out his life up until now, because Yaakov also means not in a not direct way, of doing things in a roundabout way, of getting what he wants through other people, through situations, but not directly dealing with it. And of course we see that most clear in when he manipulated out of Esav to get the blessing. He took advantage of the situation, and he figured out how to get the blessing that he wanted. And of course, when he was in the house of Lavan, he couldn't. In order to get his rightful due pay, instead of like a direct confrontation, he cut a deal and he manipulated, we know, the rods to get the speckled and spotted sheep, and everything that he did was not directed. And even when he left the house of Lavan and he ran away, instead of confronting Lavan and explaining to him why he was doing what he was doing, which, you know, we all know it was about time where he had every right to leave. I mean, he helped him amass a fortune, and he spent years devoted, and he had a lot of children in his own life, and he wanted to go back to where he came from. And I think that's understandable, and that's not a request that should be denied. And he really should have confronted it head on, and he wasn't able to escape dealing with that. As we know, Lavan chased after him, and something he had to deal with anyway. So he really probably should have dealt with it in a straightforward manner at that point. And he doesn't. And then we know that when he leaves and he's headed back and he's about to confront Esav, at that time when he's very fearful, and he crosses his family over and he goes back for the small vessels that he left behind, that he has an encounter with the Sar Shel Esav, the angel, the alter ego, whatever you want to call it. And that's where he gets the name change from Yaakov, who is the one who lives vicariously through, who gets things in a roundabout manner, and he has this battle with his higher self, with the Yisrael, or you can say also, they say his alter ego, the Esav, but the Esav within him, which he was supposed to conquer and utilize in the service of God. And he has a battle, and it's all night, because it's an internal struggle that he has all night, and it's, you know, time's getting up, and he has to leave, and he has to go back, and he has to confront Esav. And at the end, we see that the angel says, he should be called Yisrael, Yashar El. No more should he be called Yaakov. And he says, why? Because he says, you have contended with God and with man, and you have come out victorious. And what he was doing right there was a pep talk. It was, you have done it. You have gone through so much in your life, Yaakov. You can do this. If you managed everything up until now, which life was not easy for him, and he came out victorious, you can handle this meeting with Esav. You can handle everything in life. Just not only have you contended with God and man and come out straight, but Yashar El means walk straight with God. Walk straight in the ways of God. Do what's right, and everything will be okay. And that's where he was supposed to be at that moment. At that moment, he was supposed to take on that persona and be that way. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. We know in the rest of the stories that Yaakov, as opposed to all the other four mothers and fathers, when he gets his name changed, it doesn't stick to Yisrael. It goes back and forth. We have Yaakov, Yisrael, Yaakov, Yisrael, and he doesn't stick with this higher self that he's supposed to be, but he falls back on, as we all do, and in times he falls back on this Yaakov, who has this insecurity and this inability to do certain things, which we'll get into as we go forward. But we'll see it right away, right now, when he goes to meet Esav, and he's very fearful, and he's not forthright with Esav. I mean, he tells, when Esav says, he embraces him and hugs him and kisses him and says, walk with me, my brother, and wants to join forces. Yaakov says, go ahead, I'm only going to slow you down, and I'll meet up with you, which he never ends up doing. And we know that the Midrash tells us that he hides Dinah in a box because he doesn't want Esav to see Dinah and want to marry her. And although his intentions are looking out for what he believes is best for his daughter, the Mefarshim tell us that he wasn't looking at the flip side, because she could have been the positive force. She could have been the one to uplift him, the Ezer Kenegdo, the one to bring him closer, just like also Yaakov actually could have been, because there is a train of thought that tells us that Yaakov and Esau were supposed to be more of a Yisachar and a Zevulun had they come together. So if perhaps Yaakov would have answered the call of Esau in the moment, which was in the moment genuine, and dealt with it, perhaps he could have been the spiritual and Esau could have been the physical, and they could have combined forces. They could be collaborative, and they could each lift each other up where they needed it, and they could have been a positive force out into the world and have a greater effect like we're supposed to do. But Yaakov sidestepped that, and he hit Dinah, and we're told that Dinah, like I said, she could have possibly brought Esau up. I mean, she was like plan B anyway, because as we know, Leah was meant for Esau, and Dinah is a lot like Leah, as we're told when it says Vayetze Dinah, she went out. She was like her mother, who was the personality to go out, and this was something that was matim, that was appropriate, that would be fitting for Esau in terms of a couple of, they had the same kind of tendencies of how to do what they wanted to do, but Leah wanted to do it for the good, and she could have influenced Esau for the good, but she didn't want to, and her father gave her to Yaakov. We know the way the story goes, and so Dinah is plan B, but Yaakov did not let that happen, and there is a midrash that says, which nobody really wants to hear, but that because he held her in the box, that was the reason why Dinah ends up getting raped. And I don't think it means necessarily as a punishment. Like, I think we're hearing it wrong, because I think what it means is that there's supposed to be a combination of forces. That there's supposed to be something that comes out of Dinah and a worldly power, that the combination together yields something that needs to come into this world. And things that are supposed to happen in this world can either happen Lignai or Shvach. It could happen because we have rise to the challenge, and we met it, and we did it in a positive way, or if we don't, then it's going to come some other way. If we don't agree to step up to the challenge, we're not going to be able to evade what is meant to be. It'll come in some other way, whether we like it or not. So that's one big reason why we should always rise to a challenge. But as we know, Yaakov was fearful, and he was worried about his family, and he was worried about the influences, and I think that's very understandable, but it wasn't what would have been very powerful and would have sped up the place where we're trying to go. So now we had to take the longer route, as we know, right? So this is one thing about and I think there's, by the way, the proof of backup of what I'm saying is that not only does he get this name change when he has this battle with the angel, but after he meets Esau, and we went through that story, and then we have the episode with Dinah happens right after that, where she gets raped by Shechem, and then of course we know Shimon and Levi, they come and they destroy and kill all of Shechem, and things plummet downhill. After that, if you notice in the narrative, there's Yaakov tells them they end up taking all the spoils, and Yaakov says, "Get rid of all the avodah zarah. We're going to go bring sacrifices to God." And then we're told that Hashem says to Yaakov, again, this is the second time, he says, "You're not going to be Yaakov. From now on, you're supposed to be Israel." So this is the second time he's being told. Why is he being told it again if he's already being told it? Because he didn't listen. He didn't heed the call. He didn't do what he was supposed to do to avoid the steps in between. So God comes in again and says, you got to listen. This is who you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be Israel. You have to walk Yisrael in the ways and not be fearful, because you can do what's meant to do. But unfortunately, what happens after that is we get into Vayeshev. And what's Vayeshev Yaakov? The famous Rashi is Yaakov, it says, requested to Le'shev Shalva. He wanted to reside in peace. He didn't want to, he thought like, okay, I've been through all this in my life, all these difficulties, all these challenges. I'm old. He wanted to just, he built himself a home and place for his cattle, and he was like ready to just, pass the mantle on to Yosef. And how do we know that? Because in Vayeshev it says Vayeshev Yaakov, and then it says Elo told Yaakov Yosef. So he wants to now kind of retire and pass it over. He thinks that Yosef has leadership qualities, and he wants to pass the mantle over to Yosef. But the problem, so many problems with that, but the first problem that I'd like to mention is that, and I think this is pertinent to something that we have to learn is as parents, is that our children are given to us, and in our care that we take care of them and we educate them, but when they grow up, is they don't end up being, or they shouldn't end up being, what we think is an extension of us, and that we retire and they take over and they're the future. Because for every single day that we exist, we have our own tafkid that is divorced from the tafkid of our children. And for every day that Yaakov's still alive, he has a purpose. He has a God-given purpose that only he can serve, and he can't hand over. He can't just decide he's going to hand over the mantle now to Yosef, and he thinks he's in his old age, but he has over 30 years left to go in his life, and he's supposed to do things and not hand it over to his children. But if we look in the stories, in all the stories, is that Yaakov, he doesn't do that, and not just in this case. I mean, if we look back into the stories that we just mentioned with Shechem and with Dinah, when first what happens is Dinah, when she gets violated, and he finds out before the sons found out. It says he kept silent. He didn't say a thing. He waited for his sons to come home, and then his sons dealt with it. And as we know, the sons, he was not happy with what Shimon and Levi did. He chastised them. He said, "What'd you do? Why'd you make us conspicuous? We're few in number. You're jeopardizing the family." And he was very angry with them. But then they answer him and they say, "Well, what should we have done? Should our sister be a harlot?" And then he's quiet. Okay, you know what? It's not up to him to be quiet. And I feel like as the father, as the patriarch, if he thought that was wrong and that's what they shouldn't have done, that requires an answer. That requires, what should we have done? You can't just tell people they did wrong without giving them an alternate solution for the future. And the same thing holds true in terms of him not dealing with it and letting somebody else deal with it. Is when well, before we get to that, I just want, because let's go in order, is when it happens, after that story, I don't know if you remember, but Rachel gives birth to Binyamin, and she dies in childbirth, and she gets buried, and Yaakov settles in that area for a while, and then we're told that Reuven sleeps with Bilhah, and it says Vayishma Yisrael. All it says is that Yaakov heard, period. He says absolutely nothing. Why is he saying nothing? He doesn't bring it up until he's on his deathbed. This is clearly something that was wrong because he says it there. But yet he doesn't say anything. He doesn't deal with it. And again, as the patriarch and building the nation, when something is so clearly an outrage and wrong, that's something that has to be dealt with. That's something that has to be discussed. If only to bring out the conversation and see, why you did it, why it's wrong, what are the motives, what are you harboring, like all that, to bring it to the fore, and so that you can resolve certain issues. But that wasn't done at all. And all this is problematic. So, right, okay, so in terms of rising to the challenge and being who you are and not being fearful, I mean, that's the first thing I think that we have to learn, is that it's imperative to us to meet the challenges that come our way, and that we can avoid things. So if we think we're sidestepping, we're not sidestepping, we're pushing it off, and it's probably going to be more difficult later, and that's something that needs to be done. But in terms of now we go to the story that we're up to with Yosef, and as we know, the first and most obvious thing that's done wrong there is incurring the jealousy of the brothers by giving him the Ketonet Pasim. And it's funny because I know somebody who wrote a blog on it, and we were having a discussion, and she said, why did he do that? Why didn't he learn from his own situation where the father gave the blessing in it to him, and then that caused Esau to want to kill him. And so why is he going to give the blessing to the younger one? And why is he doing the same exact thing? So I said, you know what? I think the way you're looking at it is from an outsider. But if you look at it as being Yaakov thought he deserved the blessing. And Yaakov thought he had to trick it out of his father. And he said, you know what? Yitzchak thought he was going to die. He's about to give the blessing. He gives the blessing because he tricked him. But if he feels like maybe if in my lifetime, if I establish the fact that I know that Yosef is capable and I know that he's the one to do it, and I establish it from an early point, then he thinks that he's giving the one who deserves it, just like he deserved it, even though he was younger. He's giving the one who deserves it, and he's clearly stating it from the get-go to avoid future issues. But, it could go, who knows what was really going on in his head, but the bottom line is that he showed favoritism, which always is not a good thing. And that started the negative feelings from the brothers. That was the beginning of the source of the problem. And the commentaries say that the problem was twofold, because it was brought on by Yaakov, but it was continued, as you see from the story, by Yosef, because Yosef, and this is the problem with interaction, Yosef, we're told, was Ben Zikunim. So Ben Zikunim, the definition is a child of the old age, and they say that's why Yaakov loved Yosef, because he was older. But the Mefarshim go on, like Uncle says, that it indicates his wisdom. Ben Zikunim it's saying that he's wise. There's different interpretations. Also, there's one which I kind of like, which is the Rambam, who says that it's actually a position, that it used to be that when the father got older and had a son in his old age, he needed somebody because he's not capable to be kind of like his right-hand man and to do everything, and this was considered a great honor. And that's what Ben Zikunim is, the one who gets that honor of being there with the father and doing everything with the father, and that's why you see him sending Yosef to do different things, to check on the brothers and whatnot. But anyways, Yosef, as smart as he was, and we know that he was very bright, we should not confuse brightness and intelligence with also, I think, emotional intelligence and understanding social cues, because clearly that was not cultivated at this point. He wasn't able to see that his brothers were feeling a lot of hatred, because what he kept doing just was exacerbating the situation. And I think one huge lesson that we can get is that when he gave the first dream and they were really upset, that should be cue number one. Don't do it again the second time. But yet he does the same exact thing and tells over the dream the second time. Use a different tactic, even if you feel you have to somehow do something else, But he doesn't, change strategy. That should be rule number one.
It might have been more kind of a situation of being a reluctant prophet. I mean, those dreams were prophecy, and maybe he just couldn't contain it. Maybe it was just like he was pressed to speak it.
Right. So that's actually a tremendous point, because we're told that if somebody has a prophecy, whoever it's concerning, that it's their obligation to share it. And so I think that's a very strong point. But maybe the way in which he did it was not the way to do it, because it says that the brother continued to hate him, and it says for two things: for his dreams and for his words. So it distinguishes the two. It's not just the dream, but it's the way he conveyed the dream to them, and that was problematic. So there's something I wasn't going to bring up, but I can't control myself, because it's very interesting. I was thinking a lot about his dreams, because he has two dreams and Paro has two dreams, and we know when Paro has two dreams and he interprets it, he's like, they're not two dreams, they're one and the same, and they both have the same meaning, and the second one is just to tell you that this is around the corner, it's going to happen right away, and we got to get on it. But with his dreams, it can't mean that, because we know that doesn't happen right away, so it's not something that's imminent. So I was trying to understand why two dreams that seem to be more or less the same, and it doesn't have the same meaning. So what is the difference besides people say that, the first is the brothers and the second one is the mother, father, and the brothers, because the sun, the moon, and the stars bowing down to him. But as we know, the second one is very problematic, because the mother has already passed, and so what could that possibly mean? And you can take it to mean in the future and the day's time, whatever that would mean, the mother would bow down. But I came up with my own interpretation. So again, like when I make something up, you can just totally nix it, but but I think that to me this resonates, is that it's very interesting, and it's fascinating to note that in the first dream he says your sheaves and my sheaves, and he talks about their sheaves surrounding his, and it's once removed, and their sheaves bowing to his sheaf. Now in the second dream, it's the sun, the moon, and the stars are bowing down to me. It's like first person, and it's not once removed by a thing. So what I think is that in the first dream there was a potential for actually to be a collaborative effort, that yes, he would be the leader when it came time to go down in Egypt, but the surrounding him, it shows a support system, and they're working together. So they would consent or agree that he's the leader and defer to him, but they were also somehow helping in this nature of the sustaining of Egypt, which is a potential, which I'll show you later on in the narrative why I think that. And the second one is that once he gave over that dream and they hated him, and it says they couldn't even talk to him, they couldn't deal with him anymore after that dream, that altered, by his course of action, that made that dream an impossibility, because at that point they hated him, they wanted nothing to do with him, and there was no way that they were going to consent to him being the leader. And so the sun and the moon and the stars is what that was the new plan of action now that was going to happen, because he didn't do this the right way. And what I think that represents is, I do think that the stars are the Shvatim, but I think that the sun and the moon, and this has been discussed for other reasons, represent the moon represents Yaakov or the Jewish nation, and the sun represents the Egyptian culture or the rest of the world, because the rest of the world operated according to we know, like the sun god and the solar system, and we were the lunar, and so therefore meaning the whole world would bow down, meaning acknowledge Yosef's power, which is what happens. He becomes basically the ruler of Egypt, and the whole world comes to him for sustenance, and everybody has to come to Yosef and acknowledges that he has saved the world. So I think that that's dream B, and that they weren't the same exact dream. But anyways, that's just a side note. So, right, okay, so in terms of relationships, that's Yosef. But I wanted to go to talk about skip this. I want to talk about Yehuda now, because as we know, we see Yosef, and he develops his character, and he becomes the national sustainer and everything. But we know there's two types of leaders. There's the Yehuda and there's the Yosef. And Yehuda is really represents the ideal because of his personal accomplishments and his building of his own character. Yehuda was seen as a leader before, already all the way back when they threw Yosef in the pit. Reuben, as we know, there's a lot we could talk about Reuben, but God bless you, I don't think we have time, so we'll just go and speak to Yehuda. But Reuben, gets them to push off what they're going to do, but he's not successful other in pushing off for a little bit. But Yehuda is a lot wiser, and here's where he differed with Yosef in that he understood how to work with the brothers at that time. And he waited till they're sitting down and they're eating until he has them less hot-headed, and he gives them a plan that they can deal with in order not to go, and we'll sell them, what do we have to benefit for, whatever. So he's seen as a leader, he's listened to, he knows how to deal with the brothers, and we see that the brothers are very disappointed because after this story, when Yosef is sold, and the story with Tamar is about to happen, it says, "Vayared Yehuda goes down," and the Mepharshim say he goes down in the esteem of his brothers, because they're like, "Why'd you let us do that?" Because they saw the grief, how grief-stricken Yaakov was, and how devastated Yaakov was, and how it destroyed his life and basically destroyed all their lives, because nothing was the same after that. And they said, "How can you? We listened to you. You could have controlled this." And he had gone down in the esteem of his brothers, and things had spiraled down in his life as well. As we know, Er died and Oni died, and the whole episode with Tamar. But of course, he rose to the occasion when he was confronted by, whose things are these? He's the one who impregnated me. And he says, "Sakami many," and this is the turnaround, pivotal moment for Yehuda, where he steps up to the plate, as painful as that is, and he could have gotten away with not doing it, and that's huge. And from there, he kind of takes he just takes the wheel and takes responsibility. And then on, as we know, when the brothers come back and they have to bring Binyamin, because Yosef says, "If you can't come back, you can't see my face," and whatever. If you don't return with Binyamin, and Reuben, as we know, is not successful in. She says, "If I don't bring him back, you can kill both my sons," which Yaakov's like, "What?" Obviously that plan did not work. That's not what he was looking for. But again, Yehuda, and then this is also a key in terms of understanding how to deal with people, is Yehuda waited for the right moment. It was a moment, he waited a little longer till it was really, Yaakov was feeling the urgency in terms of going. And he explained that he was going to do this Arevus. He was going to equate himself in the responsibility, and if not, he's sinned for all days. He was explaining that he understood the weight and what it meant, what Binyamin's life meant to him, and he was coming to him on a level of Yaakov's mentality, where Yaakov had to acquiesce, because he knew how to convince him. And that's very important, to know who you're talking to know when to approach, to know what to say. And it's not just okay to show that you're serious by showing that you're willing to take a major fall, because that's not always what somebody cares about. But what people most care about is that you understand them, you understand what they're coming, you understand their needs or their pain, and that's what influences people, and not the fact that you're necessarily willing to put a big stake into it. That's not always the answer. So Yehuda displays an understanding of what to say, when to say, and that's very crucial in dealing with people. I just want to go back, because this is something also I think that's like so important for us, especially me, because as we get older, I think like we deal with this, and Yaakov is kind of really still obsessed with this with Yosef. Once he finds out that Yosef is still alive, he says, "Now I can." His first reaction is, "Now I can die." What do you mean? What do you mean? Now you can die? Now it's enough for me that Yosef died. Now I can die. No, you can't die. He was, when he came down to Mitzrayim, he was 130 years old. He didn't die till he was 147. He had 17 more years. God didn't have plans for him to die. Like he probably was supposed to go down. And when he had that meeting with Paro, other than just giving him a blessing and going out the door, he had so much knowledge, he had so much intelligence, he had so much character and ethics and morals, and the influence he could have brought there was his responsibility. And
I've just been saying, now my life is complete.
Yeah,
just like an expression to say.
No, I can die
to
in
me that.
in the future.
Right. But God comforts him when God tells him he's going to go down. He says, "And don't worry." He says, "Yosef will close your eyes," meaning that that's the symbol of two things. First of all, that obviously he'll see him and that he'll be there when he passes. But the closing of the eyes is symbolic with, when your eyes are open, it means like we have the need as people to see what's going on in the world in terms of, we think if we can see it, it indicates some control over things. And the fact that Yosef will be the one to close eyes is that God knows that he has faith in Yosef and that Yosef is the leader. And for him to know that Yosef will be the one to close eyes, meaning he is going to take that mantle. Now he is going to take care of the family, which he does. Once Yaakov dies, he says, "Don't worry, I'm going to take care of all of you." And that is comforting to Yaakov. So in a sense, that's true, but I still think that, and the Mefarshim say, like when he meets with Paro and he's like, "My years were few and bad and not as much as in the Gurei Aviv," and all the negativity, and instead of instead of looking back and talking about the difficulties had and embracing the future, that's seen as not a good thing. And again, as Jewish people, we believe that every moment we're alive, we have something that only we can accomplish and only that we can do. And I feel like there was a lot more for Yaakov that I don't know, that I feel somehow was remiss based on how the Pesukim phrase it. But I take that for me as a lesson in my own life because your kids don't always do things that you want them to be doing, and I think that I'm speaking for my own self, is like I always look at that because I guess I'm looking at it as an extension from the self, and I'm thinking, but that's them and that's not me, and my tafkid is still my tafkid, and I can't say, what purpose is it, which I found myself saying, like, why bother doing this if the kids but it's not kosher, because you still have to put out what you have to put out, you still have to do what you have to do, and their lives will be theirs. Enough about that, but I just really quickly want to, because we're almost out of time, and I wanted to mention in terms of relationships, because especially when we're talking about dealing with other peoples and other nations and whatever, I think that there's something to be learned here. And first of all, the Netziv says, we know that when they were coming down to Mitzrayim, Yosef says they'll go to Goshen, there'll be shepherds there, and his purpose is to separate them so that they're not influenced by the culture of Egypt, which was not the most spiritual, godly place, and he wanted to keep them safe. But as I mentioned before, what's interesting, when they come down and we're told that Yosef takes 5 miksei. He takes 5 of like the more miskein, the not the strong, impressive brothers, but the least of the brothers, and he says, and tell them that you're shepherds because they can't stand shepherds and they find that repulsive, and like just make sure you'll be separate. But when Paro meets with them, he says, oh, what do you do? And they're like, we're shepherds. And he says, you know what? If there are any amongst your brothers that are on Sheichayil, and to put them in leadership positions with my cattle, which is not such a small thing, by the way, because when the Egyptians had the famine, at a certain point, I think it's the second year or third year, I don't remember which year, but they ran out of money, and they're like, what are we going to do for food? And Yosef says, okay, bring all your cattle, bring your horses, your sheep, your donkeys, your whatever you got, and that will be the money. So they amassed all the livestock and all the cattle of all of Egypt. So that was a huge job to put someone in charge of that. And like the brothers could have had major jobs in Egypt and helped Yosef, like I said, and they could have been a combined force where, of course, Yosef was still the higher up, but that they were interacting with the Egyptians. And I think that really would have helped in their future, because I was always thinking about when they say that the new Paro came up, it says Paro shelo yadat Yosef. What does that mean? And it says he didn't know Yosef. So why is that? Okay, aside from they said, well, was he the same Paro or was he different Paro? But didn't know Yosef tells me that he didn't know Yosef. I'll tie it in with this idea that Rabbi Sachs said. Rabbi Sachs said he differentiates Vayigash with when Yehuda comes to talk to Yosef, he comes close, he wants to speak in his ear, and when you Vayigash, if you want to appeal to somebody, you have to get up close and personal and talk and develop a relationship, as opposed to when they saw Yosef when they threw him in the pit. It says Vayar Yosef merachok. They saw him from a distance, and he says, what does distance do? When you distance somebody, you can make them the other, and you're privy to hate and all sorts of irrational things. So he's like, if you want to stay away from hate, is you can't make yourself separate or elitist or whatever. You have to, you have to have interactions and show that you're human and that you have similarities and that you're good. And the fact that Lo Yada Yosef, the Paro that knew Yosef was able to trust him and like him because he spoke to him and developed a relationship. Now, if the brothers got into these positions all around Egypt and made themselves relationship with all the Egyptians in a positive way, if they were acting ethical and moral and in the ways of God and interacting with the Egyptians, they would all know the nation to be good, moral, upstanding people who help them. And they would know them, and that would lessen the hatred, or not allow for these things to happen. But because they were separate in Goshen, they didn't interact. And not only that, but when the famine started, we know that first they gave their money, and then they didn't have money, so then they gave their livestock, and then they didn't have the livestock, so they had to give their land, and then they ended up only not even owning land, but Yosef's deal was generous because he gave them seed and let them keep 4/5 and only give 1/5 to Paro, which is a pretty decent deal. But still, it says the brothers, as opposed it says all about that, about the mission, but the brothers, they were able to acquire land and have all the food they needed and live peacefully and live separately. So here they were prosperous, they had all the land and all the food that they wanted and everything, and they were prosperous while everybody else was out of everything, and they were separate. So that is like a recipe for disaster. Of course it's going to incur hatred. And then when Yosef dies and they don't even know Yosef and they know nothing about the character of these separate people who have everything and they have nothing, and it's the fault of their brother or their ancestor, that's going to be very problematic. So and then Itziv talks about this, and it's a very difficult challenge, because separating yourself for purposes of not assimilating, because you don't want to take on the negative characteristics, is okay, because you don't want to take over the negative, is understandable. But at the same time, we're meant to be an Or L'Goyim. We're meant to interact so that we can have a positive effect with ethics and morals, and help them help this world to be a better place. But if you're not interacting, you can't do that. And then it's interesting because the Netziv also talks about later in Shemot when it says, of course they ended up being persecuted because they assimilated. So what's he saying? Because he says actually both. But the problem is it's not assimilation that we want. We don't want to assimilate in trying to be like them, in trying to live amongst them and be like them. We want to have communications and live together with them, but still obtain our morals and ethics and be distinct in terms of our character and our beliefs, and hopefully spread goodness and light that way, but not assimilating in terms of, ditching all that to be like you, because that, of course, we also know never works, because nobody respects somebody who doesn't respect themselves. And if you ditch everything you're ditching just to be like you, so maybe you'll like me, that never ever works, as we see, because a lot of that is happening now, and that's not helping. So the bottom line is we have to be who we are. We have to be strong. We have to be moral. We have to be ethical. We have to work, most importantly, of course, on ourselves, and so that we can have good relationships, and it can spiral out in concentric circles. And only through that major work will change the world. Band-aid solutions are Band-aids, and Band-aids fall off, and they don't last. So that's what I have to say, and I wish you all a Chodesh Tov, and much light, and Happy New Year.
Thank you.